Will you pray with me? God, for the gift of this day, for the opportunity to gather in this place among your people, and now again, to enter into your word and its world, and to make ourselves available for the work of your Spirit for all of these things. We offer thanksgiving, and we offer ourselves once more, asking that you will take us and make of us what you will, how you will. And now may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, for you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. This morning, we're going to take a walk through Psalm 30. And in order to do that, I want to invite you to find the Bible that, Lord willing, is still in front of you. It's blue. It used to look like the blue hymnal, but now that the hymnal's purple, you can tell the difference. And since we're in the Psalms, we're going to open that book right to the very center, and then we're going to make our way backwards a little ways. So when you have Psalm 30 in front of you, give me a big smile with all your teeth. And with your hands as well. I like that. So everybody has Psalm 30 in front of them or is close to it. Yes? Yes, okay. A couple of things by way of beginning. If you look, you will see prior to the beginning of the psalm, verse 1, that there's what's called a superscription. It should say a psalm, a song at the dedication of the temple of David. Yes, you see that? Well, there's a couple of clues and a couple of mysteries contained even within that superscription. In fact, it doesn't say temple in the Hebrew, it says house. Now, the assumption has been made as these things were written and recited and read and then gathered and edited and put together, that was the particular temple. But in this case, there is a little bit of a question there about, was this a psalm of David? Was this a psalm for David? And was this a psalm that was likely put into the Psalter long after the time of David? And if so, what might all of this mean? And I wish I could tell you, but I can't. What I can tell you is this, and issue an invitation for each psalm to think about it like a house. To think about it like a dwelling place, something that you enter into, and as you do, you recognize that there are different rooms that you might walk into, and within those rooms, there are either items of furniture, or perhaps there are coverings on the wall, paintings or tapestries. But as you enter into the psalm, that you look for these things and find that it's not just a poem or a prayer, but in fact, it is a place that we are invited to enter into and to dwell. So hold on to that as we walk together into Psalm 30 and begin to look and to see and to taste and to smell and to feel and to experience what it is that's going on. Because every psalm tells not just one, but multiple stories about God and about us and about God's people and about history, but also about right now, and about how to walk forward into the future. Psalm begins, I will extol you, O Lord, for you have drawn me up and did not let my foes rejoice over me. And right from the very beginning, we have a wonderful play of verbs back and forth. I will extol you. Raise your hand if you've had occasion in the last 6 months or 6 years to use the word extol. But you get a feeling, perhaps, of what is going on. And some of the other translations will actually say, I will praise you, and make it a little more user-friendly. But I like extol because if you look at it closely, what you will find is that, in fact, what it means is to lift up. And so when we praise God, we are lifting up the name of God. And you see the wonderful wordplay there. It says, I will lift you up, O Lord, because you have done what? You have lifted me up. And you have this image already about being low and being made high and how God is at work. I will extol you, O Lord, for you have drawn me up and did not let my foes rejoice over me. O Lord my God, I cried to you for help, and you have healed me. O Lord, you have brought up my soul from Sheol, restored me to life from among those gone down to the pit. So the psalmist continues from extolling to crying. I cried for help, and you healed me, you brought me up, and you restored me to life from among those gone down to the pit. Now, I know full well that there might have been a couple of you who used the word extol, but there are none of you who are using the word Sheol, right? The word that you would use for Sheol is not one that we're supposed to use here when we're talking back and forth. But if you imagine it as a place of the dead or the bad place, there are probably some of you who have either heard or said in the last I don't know how long that someone ought to go to a place, right? Well, here, that place is identified as Sheol, but also more specifically as a pit. Now, if you found yourself physically in a pit, what would your hope be? To be lifted up and taken out of the pit. But the psalmist here is more than that, saying not just a pit, but death itself. And that translation there about those gone down to the pit is either those who are going down and the psalmist is rescued before getting there, or those who have gone down. And the psalmist is identifying that he or she singularly has been lifted up out from death. If you are lifted up out from death, what do we call that, friends? Resurrection. And so here in the 30th Psalm already we have a taste and a flavor for resurrection. Now, what is the really, really bad news about resurrection? It is this. Resurrection can only ever take place if there has been a death. And so you feel that from the beginning in the story that the psalmist is telling. And we know what it's like, all of us, in various ways, to suffer. And in the midst of that suffering, to feel that there will be no hope, there will be no joy, there will be no morning. It will be dark and it will be night forever. And the psalmist begins to talk to us and invite us into a conversation about something remarkable and something different, something we cannot achieve ourselves on our own, but that God does. Resurrection. Sing praises, verse 4. Sing praises to the Lord, O you his faithful ones, and give thanks to his holy name. I want to stop there for just a second. A shift has taken place. It has gone from the first person speaking to now what? An imperative for all of us to join in. You see, the stories that are ours about who and how and whether and what God is doing in our lives are not singular, individual, and personal stories alone. They are stories that spur us on to encourage and to admonish and to invite others to join in. And so the psalmist says, sing praises to the Lord, O you his faithful ones. Give thanks to God's holy name. Why? Why? Because, verse 5, God's anger is but for a moment. God's favor is for a lifetime. God's anger is a puff of wind. God's anger is the snap of a finger. God's anger is a moment, an instant. But the joy and the love, I said favor, didn't I? No. God's anger is small, fleeting. But the favor, the joy, the empowerment, and the love that God gives is for a lifetime. Weeping may linger for the night, but joy comes with the morning. One of the things you may notice about the Psalm so far is we don't know what the circumstance is or was or has been for this psalmist. And the beauty of that is this is our song. And while we're in this house, and while we are observing and while we are experiencing, we are invited to make it our own. To take from this general statement about weeping in the night and joy in the morning and remember our own stories where that, in fact, has been the case. I keep asking y'all to raise and lower your hands. Don't raise them this time. But I guarantee you that if I were to ask you about whether or not you have ever wept in the night, we would all raise our hands. We all know what that's like. And it is similar but different from every one of us about what's going on. And this psalm gives us that hope as well as that path forward, that the morning comes and that joy comes with the morning. Verse 6, as for me, I said in my prosperity, I shall never be moved. And immediately we stop and think about the danger of comfort and prosperity. Here it doesn't say that something bad has happened. He's not claiming that the prosperity that has been enjoyed is because of something that the psalmist has done. But there's a bit of a warning here about being comfortable, being prosperous, and believing that in that moment, that is how it will continue forever. In my prosperity, I shall never be moved, I said. By your favor, O Lord, you had established me as a strong mountain. But then the turn comes. You hid your face. I was dismayed. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you. The Lord lift up countenance to you and grant you peace. You've heard that blessing over and again. And it feels like something that happens in church, right? But you also know what it's like when you are with or for someone and something is broken and you turn away from each other. And it will not be made right until one or the other or both of you turn again and face each other. And the psalmist reminds us about how important that face is. When the face of God is hidden, there is no hope. When the face of God is before you, all things become possible. Verse 8, to you I cried, O Lord. To you, O Lord, I cried, and to the Lord I made supplication. What profit is there in my death if I go down to the pit? Will the dust praise you? Will it tell of your faithfulness? Hear, O Lord, and be gracious to me. O Lord, be my helper. Now, in studying this psalm and reading a variety of different people commenting, this is an interesting little place in the psalm because the voice that's given makes all the difference. That is, when the psalmist begins to ask God, what profit is there in my death if I go down to the pit? Will the dust praise you? Will it tell of your faithfulness? The psalmist has the kind of relationship with the Almighty, so much so that she is able to push and to be irreverent and to try to manipulate and cajole and to try to convince God to do something. Think about this in a power relationship. Clearly, the psalmist is the one with less power, but here the psalmist begins to try to reach out and convince God, and it's frankly not very polite if you pay attention, is it? The psalmist is saying, who's going to praise you? Who's going to praise you? Is the dust going to do it? No, the dust isn't going to do it. Is the dust going to tell your story? Of course the dust isn't going to tell you. So who's going to tell your story? I am. So God, rescue me. Save me. Give me a story to tell, and I will tell it And we come to the last couple of verses, and the story is told. You have turned my mourning into dancing. You have taken off my sackcloth and clothed me with joy, so that my soul may praise you and not be silent. O Lord my God, I will give thanks to you forever. Friends, when God blesses, when God rescues, when God takes the death and brings resurrection, when God takes the sorrow and in its place brings joy, it demands a response. And the response that it demands is praise and thanksgiving. Again, think in your own life about the last time that something absolutely wonderful happened to you. And what did you want to do with that joy? But share it, to tell the story. It used to be that you would find primarily grandmothers, but grandfathers as well, and they would reach into either their purse or into their wallet, and they would pull out something that looked like an accordion, right? And on that accordion, what did we find? Pictures. And they were all pictures of themselves on vacation, right? Now, what were they pictures of? Their grandchildren. And why on earth would they want to show you pictures of their grandchildren? Because of joy. Because of all the best kind of pride. Because they really believed that sharing that with you was somehow going to bring joy to you. Right? Otherwise, it just feels a little ridiculous. Friends, when God saves, we respond by giving God the credit, by singing God's praises. We cannot help but jump up and shout and sing and proclaim the great good news. Now, in this psalm, we don't know all of the specifics. And in your life, not everyone knows all of the specifics. But what is very clear here is that we are called because we are made to be a people who rejoice, to be a people who give thanks, to be a people who share great good news. Why do we have Psalm 30? Well, if you look in the bulletin, and you can walk and take this with you, and this will close the preaching part of the service. Why Psalm 30? So that my soul may praise you and not be silent. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.